The silver locket lay on the workbench between them, catching the amber light of the forge fire, and Ethan Norwood knew before she spoke that she was giving it back. "I cannot accept this," Dara Coldbrook said quietly, her green fingers pushing the delicate chain across the scarred wood toward him. Her voice carried the careful dignity he had come to recognize over the months. She had been bringing vegetables and firewood to his forge, trading goods, that let her avoid the general store where the human merchants spoke too loudly about monsters and savages when orcs entered. "You worked hard on this. It is beautiful, but you know what will happen if people see an orc wearing a human craftsman's silver." Ethan's jaw tightened. He was a broad-shouldered man with calloused hands and iron gray streaking his dark hair, a veteran of the frontier wars who had learned his trade after hanging up his sword. His forge sat at the eastern edge of Milford, the last building before the wilderness began, positioned perfectly for travelers coming off the mountain pass. That isolation had let him do business with orc traders when others would not, had let him learn that the stories told in taverns bore little resemblance to the reality of the people who lived in the forest settlements beyond the human borders. It had also let him fall in love with a woman he had no right to court. "I do not care what they think," he said, but even as the words left his mouth he knew they rang hollow. He did care, not for his own sake perhaps, but for hers. Already there had been whispers when she came to his forge, questions about why the orc woman visited so often, suggestions that perhaps the blacksmith had unnatural sympathies. If she wore something he had made, something clearly crafted as a gift rather than purchased as simple trade, the whispers would become shouts. "You should care," Dara said, and her dark eyes held his with a steadiness that made his chest ache. "Your business is already suffering because you trade fairly with my people. If you give me gifts, if you make your favor obvious, they will drive you out. I will not be the reason you lose everything you have built here." She was taller than most human women, nearly matching his own height, with the lean, athletic build of someone who worked hard every day of her life. Her tusks were small, barely visible when her mouth was closed, and her features carried a striking beauty that the prejudice chose not to see. She wore practical clothes, leather and wool meant for the frontier cold, and kept her black hair braided back from her pointed ears. Ethan had spent 3 months carving the pattern on that locket, working late into the night after his paying work was done, trying to capture in silver the way frost looked on pine needles, because she had once mentioned loving the first freeze of autumn. He had made 2, actually, a matched pair, because the design had felt incomplete as a single piece. The second locket still sat in his workshop, hidden in a drawer, and he had not yet found the courage to give her both. Now she was refusing even one. "Dara," he started, but she was already stepping back from the counter, already turning toward the door. The autumn sun slanted through the windows, turning her green skin warm, and Ethan felt something crack in his chest at the careful distance she was putting between them. "Thank you for the thought," she said, and there was a weight in her voice that told him this cost her something too. "It means more than you know, but I cannot wear it. I am sorry." She left before he could find words to argue, the door closing softly behind her, and Ethan stood alone in his forge with the rejected locket gleaming on his workbench. He picked it up slowly, let the chain pool in his palm, and wondered when exactly he had become the kind of fool who fell in love with someone the world said he could not have. The autumn wore on. The aspens turned gold on the mountainsides, and the nights grew sharp with coming winter. Dara still came to the forge, still brought firewood and vegetables, still traded for the nails and hinges and tools her community needed, but something had changed between them. She was more careful now, more formal, keeping conversations brief and eyes averted. Ethan matched her distance because he did not know what else to do, and the space between them felt like a wound that would not close. He put the returned locket in the drawer with its twin and tried to forget he had ever made them. Then the rains came. The autumn storms hit the frontier with a violence that surprised even the old-timers. 3 days of pounding rain that turned the roads to rivers and the river to a raging torrent. Ethan worked through the first day, keeping his forge fire burning, heating water and preparing his workshop for refugees, because he knew what was coming. The bridge over Miller's Creek was old, built 30 years ago when the settlement was first established, and everyone knew it needed replacing. The county had promised funds for 2 years running, but the money always went elsewhere, to projects in the bigger towns where more votes lived. On the second day, the bridge went down. Ethan heard it go, a deep groan of breaking timber that carried even over the howl of wind and rain. He was standing at his window when it happened, watching the swollen creek, and he saw the central support buckle and twist, and then the whole structure folded into the water like a house of cards. Debris surged downstream, planks and railings and 40 feet of roadway, and just like that the mountain pass was cut off from town. By midday, people started arriving at his forge. They came on foot and horseback, travelers who had been on the road when the bridge failed, locals from the eastern homesteads who were suddenly stranded on the wrong side of the water. Ethan opened his doors and moved his work tools aside, making room for wet and frightened people who needed shelter until the water went down. He built up the fire and put on water for tea, and told everyone to bring their animals into his barn because the storm was not finished yet. Dara arrived near evening, leading a mule loaded with supplies. She appeared out of the rain like a ghost, water streaming from her cloak, and Ethan felt his heart kick stupidly at the sight of her. She had supplies from her community, she explained, bread and dried meat and blankets, because her people knew there would be stranded travelers and knew that Ethan's forge was the only shelter big enough to hold them all. She had volunteered to bring the aid because she could move through the storm more safely than the human refugees would welcome an orc delegation during a crisis. "You should not have come alone," Ethan said, helping her unload the mule in his barn while rain hammered the roof. "The roads are dangerous." "Less dangerous than staying would be," Dara said, and there was something in her voice that made him look at her sharply. She met his eyes and he saw anger there, carefully controlled. "Some of the young men from Milford came to our settlement this morning. They said the bridge going down was sabotage. They said orcs did it, that we were trying to cut off the town. They made threats." Ethan's hands stilled on the rope he was tying. "That is insane. The bridge was falling apart. Everyone knew it." "Yes," Dara said. "But fear makes people believe insane things. My elders sent me here with supplies as proof of good faith, and to get me away from the settlement before the situation gets worse." She pulled a sack of grain off the mule, hefting it easily despite its weight. "They thought a young orc woman might be a target if those men come back with more anger and more friends." The casual way she said it, the matter-of-fact acceptance that her life might be in danger simply for existing, made rage kindle hot in Ethan's gut. He wanted to ride into town and find those young men and explain in very physical terms why threatening innocent people was a mistake. He wanted to stand between Dara and the whole ignorant world and dare anyone to touch her. Instead he said, "You can stay here. As long as the bridge is down, you stay here where it is safe." Dara looked at him for a long moment, rain dripping from her hair, her dark eyes searching his face. Then she nodded once, sharp and decisive. "I will earn my keep. You will need help managing all these people." She was right about that. By nightfall, Ethan's forge was packed with 23 stranded souls, a mix of travelers and locals, humans all of them, and the sight of an orc woman moving among them with blankets and food caused exactly the stir he had feared. There were stares and whispers, a few hostile mutterings, one old farmer who loudly questioned whether it was safe to sleep with a savage under the same roof. Ethan shut that down fast and hard, his voice carrying the command of a man who had led soldiers in battle. This woman brought supplies from her community to help you. If that bothers you, the door is right there and the rain is still falling. Choose. The farmer subsided, grumbling, and no one else made the mistake of complaining aloud. But Ethan saw the looks that followed Dara, the way people shifted away when she passed, the careful distance they maintained. It made him furious and sad in equal measure, this confirmation that even kindness could not overcome the rod of prejudice. Dara ignored it all with a grace that humbled him. She worked tirelessly through the evening, organizing sleeping spaces, distributing food, tending to a child who had developed a fever from being caught in the rain. She moved with calm efficiency, speaking little, her presence steady and reassuring despite the hostility simmering around her. Watching her, Ethan felt that crack in his chest widen, felt the truth he had been avoiding settle into certainty. He loved her. Not just the idea of her, not just attraction or curiosity, but real love, the kind that made a man want to build a life around another person's happiness. And she had refused his gift because accepting it would hurt him. The storm blew itself out overnight, leaving a scrubbed blue sky and a landscape transformed by water. Miller's Creek still ran high and dangerous, the gap where the bridge had been a stark reminder of their isolation. The county sent a surveyor the next day, a harried man who crossed the creek by rope and pulley, and informed them that a new bridge would take at least 6 weeks to construct, possibly longer if the weather turned bad again. 6 weeks of isolation. 6 weeks of every traveler and local on the eastern side of the creek funneling through Ethan's forge, because it was the only public building large enough to serve as a way station. 6 weeks of Dara living under his roof, close enough to touch and impossible to court. Ethan decided he would survive it somehow and put his mind to practical matters. The refugees sorted themselves over the following days. Some of the travelers pushed on, finding places to stay with Eastern homesteaders, or deciding to wait out the bridge construction in the small settlements further up the pass. The locals returned to their farms and cabins, close enough to reach the forge when they needed to cross for supplies, but able to sleep in their own beds. A core group remained, people with urgent business in town or travelers with deadlines who could not afford to wait weeks for passage. Ethan turned his forge into a makeshift inn, charging modest rates for meals and lodging, and Dara became his unofficial partner in the venture. It happened naturally, without discussion, the two of them falling into a rhythm of shared work that felt as comfortable as it was bittersweet. She managed the cooking and cleaning while he handled the forge work and negotiated with the county about supply deliveries. She dealt with the guests while he dealt with the livestock. She worked from before dawn until after dark, and Ethan worked beside her, and neither of them spoke about the thing growing between them in the quiet moments when their hands brushed passing dishes or their eyes met across a crowded room. The first snow came in early November, a light dusting that melted by noon but promised heavier weather ahead. Ethan stood at his window watching the flakes fall and realized with a start that Dara had been living in his forge for 3 weeks. 3 weeks of seeing her first thing every morning, sleep soft and tousle-haired as she started the breakfast fire. 3 weeks of working beside her, learning her habits and preferences, and the way she hummed tunelessly when she thought no one was listening. 3 weeks of wanting her so badly it was a physical ache, and not being able to do a damned thing about it because a dozen guests meant a dozen witnesses to any impropriety. "You are staring," Dara said from behind him, and Ethan turned to find her carrying an armload of firewood. Snow dusted her shoulders and clung to her braid, and she looked so beautiful in the thin winter light that his throat closed. "Sorry," he managed. "Thinking about the bridge schedule. They are saying Christmas now, maybe later if we get heavy snow." Dara set the wood by the hearth and brushed off her hands. They were alone in the main room, the guests either out on errands or retired to the loft spaces Ethan had rigged for sleeping. The forge fire burned low and steady, warming the space, and in the quiet Ethan could hear his own heartbeat. "Christmas," Dara repeated. "That is 2 more months of this, of me disrupting your life and your business." "You are not disrupting anything," Ethan said. "You are holding this whole operation together. I could not manage without you." She looked at him then, really looked at him, and something shifted in her expression. "Ethan, we should talk about what happens when the bridge is finished." His stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" "I mean that I cannot stay here forever. I mean that people are already talking about the orc woman living in the blacksmith's house, about what that might mean, what we might be doing when the guests are asleep." Her voice was steady, but her hands twisted together, betraying nerves. "I hear them whispering. I see how they look at you now, like you have been compromised somehow. When the bridge opens, I need to go home, and we need to go back to how things were before." "No," Ethan said, the word coming out harder than he intended. "No, I do not want things to go back. Dara, these last weeks, working with you, being with you, it has been the happiest I have been in years. I know there are complications, I know people talk, but I do not care. I want you to stay." Dara's breath caught. For a moment he thought he saw hope flare in her eyes, bright and yearning, and then she shuddered it. "You say that now. But when I am gone, when life returns to normal, you will see it was just proximity and circumstance. You will realize that caring for me costs too much." "Is that what you think?" Ethan crossed the room to her, stopping just close enough to make his point without crowding her. "That my feelings are some kind of temporary madness brought on by a storm? I think you are a good man who does not deserve to lose his livelihood over an orc woman who can never be accepted here," Dara said, and her voice cracked on the words. "I think you made me a beautiful gift, and I gave it back because I was trying to protect you. And now I am under your roof proving all the worst gossip true, and I do not know how to protect you from this." Ethan stared at her, at the pain in her face and the rigid control in her posture, and something clicked in his mind. "You kept it," he said slowly. "When you gave back the locket, you never really let it go, did you?" Dara went very still. "What are you talking about?" The locket had a twin. "I made 2, a matched pair, because the design felt incomplete alone. When you returned the first one, I put it in a drawer with its mate and tried to forget about both of them." He watched her face, saw the color shift in her cheeks. "But you knew there were 2, did you not? You saw them both on my workbench that day, and you only gave one back." She did not deny it. She did not say anything, just stood frozen in front of him, and Ethan felt his heart start to race because her silence was confirmation. "Show me," he said quietly. "Please, Dara, if I am wrong, tell me. But if I am right, if you kept the second locket, I need to see it." For a long moment she just looked at him, her expression unreadable. Then, slowly, she reached up and unfastened the top buttons of her shirt. She pulled the collar aside, and there, resting against her green skin on a silver chain, was the twin to the locket he had locked in his drawer. The pattern caught the firelight, frost on pine needles rendered in precious metal, and it was the most beautiful thing Ethan had ever seen because it meant she had chosen him too. "I could not wear it openly," Dara whispered. "I could not let you see, could not let anyone see because it would ruin everything for you. But I could not give it up either. I thought if I kept it hidden, if I wore it under my clothes where no one would know, I could have this one small piece of you without hurting your chances at the life you deserve. Ethan's hand came up without conscious thought, his fingers brushing the locket where it lay against her collarbone. Her skin was warm under his touch, her pulse jumping, and when he looked up their faces were inches apart. "You are what I deserve," he said, his voice rough. "You are what I want. Everything else, the business, the reputation, the good opinion of people who think your kindness makes you a savage, none of it matters as much as you do." "Ethan," she breathed. And then he was kissing her, his hands coming up to cup her face, and she was kissing him back with a fierce desperation that told him she had been wanting this as long as he had. She tasted like wood smoke and hope, and when her arms came around him, he felt like he had finally come home to a place he had been searching for his entire life. They broke apart slowly, breathing hard, and Ethan rested his forehead against hers. "When the bridge opens," he said, "I want you to wear both lockets, the one you kept and the one I still have. I want everyone to see that you chose me and I chose you, and I want them to know I am not ashamed." Dara pulled back enough to meet his eyes, searching his face. "They will make your life difficult. They will take their business elsewhere, spread rumors, try to drive you out." "Let them try," Ethan said. "I have faced worse than small-minded gossip, and I would rather build a smaller life with you in it than a successful life pretending I do not love you." "You love me," she repeated, like she was testing the words, and a smile started to bloom across her face. "You really love me." "I really do," Ethan said. "I think I have loved you since the first time you brought firewood here and lectured me about my inefficient stacking method." Dara laughed, the sound bright and disbelieving, and kissed him again. "I love you too," she said against his mouth. "I have loved you for so long I forgot what it felt like not to." They stood there in front of the fire, holding each other, and Ethan felt the rightness of it settle into his bones. This was not temporary. This was not going to fade when circumstances changed. This was real, the kind of real that weathered storms and prejudice, and whatever else the world threw at them. Outside, snow began to fall in earnest, and Ethan thought about silver lockets and stubborn orc women, and the strange mercy of a broken bridge that had given him time to see what had been in front of him all along. The weeks that followed took on a different quality, the same hard work but threaded now with stolen moments of joy. They kept their relationship quiet around the guests, not hiding exactly but not advertising, both of them aware that rumors could spread quickly in close quarters. But in the early mornings before anyone else woke, they sat together by the fire and talked about everything and nothing. In the evenings after the last guest had retired, they stood at the window and watched the snow fall and made plans for a future that was starting to feel possible. Ethan retrieved the second locket from his drawer and showed it to Dara properly. Let her see how the two pieces complemented each other, designed to be worn together by two people, or layered by one. She traced the patterns with her finger, her expression soft with wonder, and when she looked up at him there were tears in her eyes. "No one has ever made me something so beautiful," she said. "No one has ever seen me the way you do." "Then everyone else is blind," Ethan said, and kissed her forehead. He started making things for her, small pieces worked late at night when the forge was quiet. A silver ring with her name engraved inside, a hair clasp shaped like oak leaves, a pendant shaped like the mountains that bordered her settlement. He did not give her these things, not yet, just made them and wrapped them carefully and added them to a growing collection, because he was waiting for the right time, for the moment when she wore both lockets openly, and he could give her everything else he had made as proof of intentions that went beyond a winter romance. Christmas came and went, marked by a simple celebration in the crowded forge. Someone had a fiddle and someone else could sing, and they pushed back the furniture and danced in the firelight while snow piled against the windows. Ethan danced with Dara and felt the weight of hostile stares and did not care, too happy with her hand in his to worry about strangers' opinions. She wore a green dress she had borrowed from one of the other guests, the color bringing out the warmth in her skin, and when she smiled at him he felt like the luckiest man alive. "Next Christmas," he said quietly as they swayed to a slow tune, "we will celebrate in our own home, just us. No audience, no compromises. Our own home," Dara repeated, and he heard the question in it, the hope barely dared. "If you will have me," Ethan said. "If you will put up with a gruff blacksmith and a frontier forge and all the complications that come with it." "I think I can manage," Dara said, her smile going wide and bright, and Ethan wanted to propose right there, wanted to make it official with all these witnesses, but he held back. Not yet. Not until the bridge opened and they could make their declaration properly, publicly, the way he had planned. January brought brutal cold and heavy snow. The bridge construction halted, the workers unable to work in the frozen conditions, and the completion date got pushed back to late February. Ethan watched the calendar and tried not to feel impatient, tried to appreciate the extra time with Dara under his roof. But he was ready now, ready to move forward, ready to stop living in a temporary arrangement and start building something permanent. Dara seemed to feel it too. She grew restless as winter deepened, her eyes often distant, and one evening Ethan found her standing at the window staring toward the mountains where her settlement lay. "Missing home?" he asked gently. "Missing knowing my family is safe," she said. "Those men who came with threats before the bridge fell, they never came back, but that does not mean the sentiment has gone away. My elders write that there have been other incidents, graffiti and property damage, the kind of harassment that happens when people want someone gone but are too cowardly to confront them openly." Ethan's jaw tightened. "When the bridge is finished, I will go with you to your settlement. We will make it clear that anyone threatening your people will answer to me." Dara turned to him, her expression complicated. "You cannot protect us from the whole world, Ethan, and you should not have to. We have lived with this hatred for generations. We know how to endure." "You should not have to endure," Ethan said fiercely. "You should be able to live without fear and trade without insult and love whoever you choose without the world punishing you for it." "Is that what we are doing?" Dara asked softly. "Loving whoever we choose?" "That is exactly what we are doing," Ethan said. He crossed to her and took her hands, felt her fingers cold from standing near the drafty window. "And when the bridge opens, everyone is going to know it. You are going to wear both lockets, and I am going to stand beside you, and we are going to show them that their prejudice has no power over what we have built." Dara squeezed his hands, her eyes bright. "You make it sound so simple." "It is simple," Ethan said. "Loving you is the simplest thing I have ever done. Everything else is just details." She kissed him then, soft and lingering, and Ethan held her close and promised himself that he would make good on his words. When the time came, he would stand with her publicly, proudly, and damn the consequences. February arrived with a thaw. The temperatures rose, the snow began to melt, and the bridge construction resumed with renewed energy. The county had authorized extra workers and materials, embarrassed by how long the project was dragging, and progress suddenly accelerated. The framework went up, the roadbed followed, and by mid-month it was clear that the bridge would be finished ahead of the new schedule. The guests began preparing to leave, packing their belongings, settling their accounts, thanking Ethan for his hospitality. The forge that had been crowded and chaotic for months started to empty, rooms opening up, the noise level dropping, and suddenly, Ethan and Dara were standing in a space that felt too large and too quiet after the constant press of people. 3 more days, Dara said, looking at the bridge visible through the window. The structure was nearly complete, just finish work remaining. Then it opens and I can go home. Then it opens and we move forward, Ethan corrected. He had been planning this for weeks, the exact moment and the exact words, and now that it was approaching he felt nervous as a boy. Dara, there is something I want to ask you, but I need to do it right. Will you meet me at the bridge opening ceremony? Dara looked at him curiously. Of course. But why so formal? We will both be there anyway. Just trust me, Ethan said, and smiled at her confusion. He spent the next 2 days finishing his last preparations. He had made her a ring months ago, but now he made a second one, sized for his own hand, because if they were doing this, they were doing it properly. He polished both lockets until they gleamed. He wrote to Dara's elders asking permission to court their daughter. A formality perhaps, but one he wanted to observe because respect mattered. And he went into town, to the hostile streets of Milford, and let it be known that he was bringing his orc partner to the bridge ceremony, and that anyone who had a problem with it could take it up with him personally. The response was about what he expected. A few people, friends from his veteran days and customers who valued his work, offered cautious support. Most people stared and whispered and made their disapproval clear. The Merchant Council sent a representative to suggest that perhaps Ethan was making a mistake, that interspecies relationships reflected poorly on the community, that his business would suffer if he insisted on this course. Ethan listened politely and then told them that his personal life was not subject to council approval. The representative left looking pinched and angry, and Ethan went home to his forge feeling lighter than he had in years. He had made his choice. Now he just had to follow through. The morning of the bridge opening dawned clear and cold, the sky a brilliant blue, and the snow-covered mountains sharp against it. Half the county seemed to have turned out for the ceremony, people gathering on both sides of Miller's Creek to watch the official ribbon cutting that would reopen the road. There were speeches scheduled, county officials and local dignitaries ready to take credit for the construction, and a festival atmosphere despite the chill. Ethan dressed carefully, clean clothes and his best boots, and he put both lockets in his pocket where they rested heavy and reassuring. Dara emerged from her room wearing the green dress from Christmas, her hair loose around her shoulders, and when she saw him waiting her face lit up with a smile that made his heart stutter. "You look beautiful," he said. "You look nervous," she replied, coming to stand in front of him. "What are you planning, Ethan Norwood?" "You will see," he said, and offered her his arm. "Walk with me." They left the forge together, walking through the melting snow toward the bridge where the crowd was gathering. Ethan felt the stares immediately, felt the ripple of reaction as people noticed the orc woman on his arm, saw the careful distance that opened around them as they approached. Dara's hand tightened on his elbow, but she kept her head high, her expression calm, and Ethan loved her even more for her courage. They found a spot near the bridge, close enough to hear the speeches but separate from the main press of the crowd. Around them, people whispered and pointed, and Ethan heard fragments of commentary, most of it ugly, some of it pitying, all of it focused on the scandal of a human blacksmith openly courting an orc. He ignored them and turned to Dara. "I need to tell you something," he said, pitching his voice low so only she could hear. "That day you returned the locket, when you told me accepting it would ruin my business, you were trying to protect me. You were putting my well-being ahead of your own happiness, and I did not understand then what a gift that was." Dara's eyes went wide. "Ethan, what are you doing?" "But I understand now," he continued, "and I need you to know that I do not want protection. I do not want safety at the cost of losing you. I want a life where we choose each other openly, where we build something together, where we stop hiding what we mean to each other." He reached into his pocket and pulled out the lockets, both of them, the chains tangling together in his palm like they were meant to be intertwined. Around them, the crowd had gone quiet, attention drawn by their conversation, and Ethan saw the county officials pausing their speeches to watch what was happening. "You kept the twin locket all this time," Ethan said, holding Dara's gaze. "You wore it hidden, where no one could see, because you thought that was the only way to have a piece of me without hurting my chances. But I do not want you to hide anymore. I want you to wear both lockets, openly, proudly, so everyone knows that we chose each other and neither of us is ashamed." He separated the chains and held up the locket Dara had been wearing, the one she had kept in secret. "This one is yours, the one you chose for yourself when you thought you could not have me." Then he held up the second locket, the twin. "And this one is mine to give you now, freely, publicly, with full knowledge of what it means." Dara's hand came up to cover her mouth, her eyes filling with tears. "Ethan, everyone is watching." "Good," Ethan said. "Let them watch. Let them see that I love you, Dara Coldbrook, and that I am asking you, in front of all these witnesses, to wear both of these lockets and to accept my courtship. Let them see that I would rather have you and face their disapproval than have their approval without you." The crowd around them had grown absolutely silent. Ethan could feel dozens of eyes on them, could sense the shock and scandal radiating from the assembled humans, but he kept his focus on Dara, on the tears streaming down her green cheeks and the wonder in her face. "You are asking me to court you," she said, her voice shaking. "Here, now, in front of everyone." "I am," Ethan said. "And I know what it will cost. I know some people will stop doing business with me, will avoid the forge, will make our lives harder. But I have spent months working beside you, falling deeper in love with you every day, and I cannot go back to pretending that we are just friends or business partners. I want more. I want everything. And I want the world to know it." Dara let out a sob that was half laugh, half cry. "You are insane. You are going to ruin your reputation." "My reputation will survive," Ethan said, "and if it does not, then it was not worth much to begin with." He stepped closer, close enough that he could speak just to her. "Dara, I am not asking you to make this choice lightly. I know there will be consequences for both of us, but I also know that hiding from prejudice only gives it power. I want to show them that their hatred cannot stop us from building something good. Will you help me do that? Will you wear both lockets and let the world see what we are to each other?" For a long moment, Dara just looked at him, her expression cycling through fear and hope and love in rapid succession. Then, slowly, she reached up and unfastened the locket she had been wearing hidden, drawing it out from under her collar. She held it in one hand and extended her other hand to Ethan, palm up, waiting. "Give me the second one," she said, her voice steady now. "I want to wear them both." Relief and joy crashed through Ethan so hard he almost staggered. He placed the twin locket in her palm, watched her hold them both up to the light so they caught and flashed, two pieces of a matched set reunited at last. Then he took them from her and fastened both chains around her neck, the lockets settling side by side against her collarbone, visible to everyone watching. "There," he said softly. "Now everyone knows." Dara touched the lockets, her fingers tracing the patterns. "Now everyone knows," she agreed and smiled at him through her tears. "I accept your courtship, Ethan Norwood. I accept your love, and I do not care who disapproves." Ethan kissed her then in front of the entire gathered crowd, a kiss that was declaration and promise and defiance all at once. Someone gasped. Someone else muttered angrily, But there was also, startlingly, a smattering of applause, a few voices raised in support, people who saw courage in their public stand rather than scandal. When they broke apart, Ethan turned to face the crowd, keeping Dara's hand firmly in his. "I am Ethan Norwood," he said, his voice carrying. "I run the forge on the eastern edge of town, and this is Dara Coldbrook, the woman I love. We are courting, openly and honestly, and if anyone has a problem with that, they can leave their complaints at my door and I will give them exactly the consideration they deserve." There was a moment of stunned silence. Then one of his old army friends, a man named Marcus who ran the feed store, stepped forward and nodded to them both. "Congratulations," he said gruffly. "You are a brave man, Norwood, and your woman is clearly your equal. I wish you both happiness." It broke the tension. Others followed Marcus's lead, some offering genuine congratulations, others simply choosing to move on and focus back on the bridge ceremony rather than engage with the scandal. The county officials resumed their speeches, determined to ignore the dramatic interpersonal scene that had just unfolded, and gradually the crowd's attention shifted away from Ethan and Dara. But the damage, or perhaps the healing, was done. Everyone had seen, everyone knew. And while there would certainly be consequences, while there would certainly be people who made their disapproval felt, Ethan and Dara had made their stand together and survived it. They stayed for the ribbon cutting, watched the officials declare the bridge officially open, and then walked back to the forge hand in hand while the festival continued behind them. The sun was high and warm despite the lingering snow, and everything felt new and possible in a way it had not just hours before. "So," Dara said as they reached the forge, "what happens now?" "Now," Ethan said, "I start courting you properly. I take you to dinner, I introduce you to my friends, I make my intentions clear to your family. All the things I should have done months ago if I had not been too afraid of what people would think." Dara squeezed his hand. "And your business? What happens when people stop coming because they disapprove of your choice?" "Then I will find new customers," Ethan said. "Or I will adapt. I have always been good with my hands, Dara. I can make and fix anything. What I cannot do is live without you now that I know what having you feels like." They stood in front of the forge, the building that had sheltered them through the long winter, and Ethan realized that it already felt like home in a way it never had when he lived here alone. Dara had made it warmer, brighter, more alive, and he could not imagine going back to the empty quiet that had existed before she arrived. "Move in with me," he said suddenly. "Do not go back to your settlement. Stay here, live with me. Let us build this life together starting now." Dara's breath caught. "Ethan, that is moving very fast. People will talk." "People are already talking," Ethan pointed out. "And I do not want to waste any more time. We have spent months living together anyway. What is the difference if it is official?" "The difference is propriety," Dara said, but she was smiling. "My elders would expect a proper courtship, a gradual progression, not a human blacksmith declaring his love at a bridge ceremony and then immediately moving his orc woman into his home." "Then we will visit your elders and ask their blessing," Ethan said. "Today, if you want. Right now. I will ride to your settlement and formally request permission to court you, and then we can come back here together with their approval." Dara laughed, the sound warm and delighted. "You really are serious about this?" "Completely serious," Ethan said. "I love you, Dara. I want to marry you eventually, build a family with you if you want that, grow old with you. But for now, I just want you to stay. Will you?" Dara looked up at him, her hands coming up to rest on his chest, right over his heart. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes, I will stay with you. Yes, we can visit my elders. Yes to all of it, Ethan, because I love you too and I am tired of being careful and hiding and protecting everyone but ourselves. Ethan kissed her again, slower this time, savoring it, and when they finally went inside the forge felt like the beginning of something rather than the ending. They rode to Dara's settlement the next day, following the trail through the forest that Dara knew by heart. The orc village was smaller than Ethan expected. Maybe 24 homes clustered around a central square, built with the same practical frontier style as the human settlements, but decorated with carved wood and woven designs that spoke to a different aesthetic tradition. People emerged as they rode in, orcs of all ages watching with wary curiosity, and Ethan felt the weight of their scrutiny like a physical thing. Dara's father met them in the square, a tall orc with graying hair and a stern expression that softened slightly when he looked at his daughter. "You are safe," he said, embracing her. "We heard about the declaration at the bridge. Half the county is talking about the blacksmith and his orc woman." "This is Ethan Norwood," Dara said, pulling back to gesture to Ethan. "The blacksmith in question. Ethan, this is my father, Dara Coldbrook." Ethan dismounted and offered his hand, meeting the older orc's eyes directly. "Sir, I have come to ask your permission to court your daughter. I know this is unconventional, and I know there are complications, but I love Dara and I want to build a life with her." Durak looked at him for a long moment, then at the lockets his daughter wore openly around her neck. "You made those," he said. "It was not a question." "I did," Ethan said. "She returned one trying to protect me from the consequences of my favor, but she kept the other, wore it hidden. When I discovered that, I knew she loved me too. At the bridge ceremony, I gave her both to wear openly, so everyone would know we had chosen each other. And now the whole county thinks you are a scandal," Durak said dryly. "My daughter has a talent for complicating her life." "Father," Dara protested, but there was laughter in her voice. Durak sighed and looked between them, his expression thoughtful. "You understand what you are asking for, human. A life with an orc woman means you will face prejudice from your own people. It means your children, if you have them, will be neither fully human nor fully orc, caught between two worlds. It means constant vigilance, constant awareness of how others perceive you. Are you prepared for that?" "I am prepared to face whatever comes if it means I get to be with your daughter," Ethan said steadily. "I am not naive about the difficulties, but I am also not willing to let fear of those difficulties prevent me from pursuing the best thing that has ever happened to me." Durak smiled then, a slight upturn of his mouth that changed his whole face. "Dara chose well," he said. "You have my permission to court her, Ethan Norwood, and you have my respect for making your intentions public rather than hiding her away like a shameful secret." Relief flooded through Ethan. "Thank you, sir. That means more than you know." They were invited to stay for a meal, and Ethan met Dara's extended family, her mother and siblings and uncles and cousins, all of them curious about the human who had declared his love so publicly. The meal was warm and chaotic, food shared family style and conversations overlapping, and Ethan felt welcomed in a way that was startling after the hostility he had faced in town. These people did not care that he was human. They cared that he treated Dara with respect and love, and that was enough. "Your family is wonderful," he told Dara later as they prepared to ride back to the forge. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and pink, and the forest was settling into evening quiet. "They liked you," Dara said, sounding pleased. "I was worried they would think you too impulsive, too human, but my father said you have a good heart. That is high praise from him." "I will try to live up to it," Ethan said. He helped her onto her horse, and then mounted his own, and they rode back through the darkening woods together, partners now in a way that felt official and right. The consequences Ethan had predicted began to manifest almost immediately. Several of his regular customers stopped coming to the forge, making excuses, or simply taking their business elsewhere without explanation. The Merchant Council sent another representative, this time to suggest that perhaps Ethan would be happier relocating his forge to a less prominent location, somewhere that would not expose travelers and families to the sight of interspecies relationships. Ethan declined politely but firmly, and the representative left making vague threats about permits and inspections. But there were positive consequences, too. Marcus from the feed store started directing customers to Ethan's forge, speaking highly of his work to anyone who would listen. A few orc traders began coming down from the mountain settlements, bringing commissions for tools and metalwork that they had previously purchased from human craftsmen who overcharged and underpaid. A young couple, human and orc, sought out Ethan and Dara specifically to thank them for their public stand, explaining that seeing them together had given the couple courage to pursue their own relationship. Slowly, gradually, the forge's customer base shifted. Some humans left, but others stayed or arrived, people who valued quality work over social prejudice. The orc trade increased significantly, enough to offset the losses and then some. And through it all, Ethan worked his forge and Dara managed their home, and they built a life together that felt hard-won and precious. Spring arrived with a rush of green growth and melting snow. The mountain passes opened fully, trade resumed its normal patterns, and life on the frontier settled back into its seasonal rhythms. Ethan proposed formally in April, on a sunny morning when the world smelled like pine and mud and new beginnings. He gave Dara the ring he had made months earlier, gold set with a small emerald because it matched her eyes, and asked her to marry him. She said yes before he finished the question, tackling him into the grass with the force of her hug, and they lay there laughing like children while the ring rolled away and had to be retrieved from under a bush. They married in June, a simple ceremony held in the clearing behind the forge with both their families in attendance. A circuit judge officiated, one of the few officials willing to perform an interspecies marriage, and Ethan and Dara exchanged vows in front of everyone who mattered to them. Dara wore both lockets, of course, the paired silver catching the sun, and Ethan wore the matching rings he had made for them, gold bands that bore each other's names. The reception was a blend of human and orc traditions, music and food and dancing that lasted until well after dark. Some of the townspeople came, the ones who had supported them from the beginning, or who had gradually come around as they saw the genuine love between Ethan and Dara. The Merchant Council stayed away, making their disapproval clear, but Ethan found he did not care. He had everyone who mattered, and the absence of those who could not accept his choices only made the celebration feel more authentic. Happy? Dara asked him late in the evening when most of the guests had departed, and they stood together watching the stars emerge over the mountains. Happier than I have ever been, Ethan said honestly. He pulled her close, felt her warmth against his side, and marveled at how right this all felt. Thank you for keeping that locket. Thank you for not giving up on us even when you thought you should. Dara touched the silver at her throat, the paired lockets that had started everything. Thank you for seeing past what I am to who I am. Thank you for asking me to wear both of these openly, for choosing me publicly when it would have been easier to hide. I would choose you 1,000 times, Ethan said. In front of any audience under any circumstances, you are the best decision I ever made. They stood there under the stars, husband and wife now, partners in every sense, and Ethan thought about silver lockets and broken bridges, and the strange ways that love found you when you were brave enough to reach for it. The world would always have people who disapproved, who thought their relationship was wrong or scandalous or unnatural. But the world also had people who saw courage and chose to support it, who looked past surface differences to recognize genuine connection. And in the end, the only opinions that mattered were theirs, the choice they had made to build this life together despite the obstacles. Dara turned in his arms and kissed him, slow and sweet, and Ethan kissed her back, knowing that this was just the beginning. They had years ahead of them, challenges to face and joys to share, a whole lifetime to build on the foundation they had started with a pair of silver lockets and a declaration at a bridge opening. But for now, for this perfect moment under the stars, they had everything they needed. They had each other, openly and honestly, and no amount of prejudice or disapproval could take that away. The forge prospered over the following years. Ethan's reputation as a master craftsman spread through both human and orc communities, and his business became known as a place where all were welcome regardless of species. He trained apprentices, both human and orc, teaching them his craft and the values of respect and quality work. Dara expanded their operations, adding a trading post that specialized in goods from both cultures, creating a bridge between communities that had been isolated for too long. Their home became a gathering place for other mixed couples, a safe haven where interspecies families could meet and share experiences and support each other. Ethan and Dara hosted gatherings regularly, their table always crowded with friends and family, their hearth always warm with welcome. They became advocates in their own quiet way, proving through their daily lives that love between different peoples was not only possible but enriching. In their third year of marriage, Dara became pregnant. The pregnancy was difficult, worrying them both because of the unknowns of interspecies conception, but she carried to term and delivered a healthy baby boy in the autumn. They named him Zachary Norwood, and he had his mother's green skin and his father's dark eyes, and was the most beautiful thing either of them had ever seen. Zachary grew strong and curious, a child who belonged to both worlds and neither, and Ethan and Dara raised him to be proud of his heritage on both sides. They taught him his father's trade and his mother's traditions, spoke to him in both languages, gave him a foundation that would let him navigate the complicated world he had been born into. When Zachary was 2, they had a second son, Aaron, who looked more human but had his mother's pointed ears and her fierce spirit. And 2 years after that, a daughter arrived, Vera, who had her father's features softened into femininity and her mother's strength evident from the start. The Merchant Council gradually changed its stance as the years passed, and the sky did not fall despite the presence of an interspecies family in their community. Young people grew up seeing Ethan and Dara's relationship as normal, unremarkable, and the prejudice that had once been universal became just another opinion rather than an absolute truth. Other mixed couples followed their example, settling in the area, building lives and families, and slowly, the frontier town became known as a place of relative tolerance. Ethan and Dara watched their children grow, watched their community evolve, watched the world change in small incremental ways that added up to something significant. They never forgot how hard their beginning had been, never took for granted the acceptance they had earned, but they also allowed themselves to hope that their children's generation would face fewer obstacles than they had. The silver lockets remained, worn by Dara every day, a reminder of the moment they chose each other publicly. Sometimes guests would ask about them, and Dara would tell the story of how Ethan made them as a pair, how she returned one but kept the other in secret, how he discovered her hidden love and asked her to wear both openly. It became a story told at their gatherings, a legend of sorts, proof that courage and honesty could overcome prejudice and fear. Years turned into decades. Ethan's hair went fully gray and then white, and Dara developed the laugh lines that came from a life well lived. Their children grew and married and started families of their own, giving them grandchildren who ran through the forge yard and learned metalworking from their grandfather and trading from their grandmother. The business passed to Zachary eventually, when Ethan's hands grew too stiff for the delicate work he had once specialized in. But Ethan remained involved, teaching and advising and watching with pride as his son maintained the standards he had set. On their 30th wedding anniversary, Ethan and Dara stood in the same clearing where they had married, surrounded by 3 generations of family and friends. The crowd was mixed now, human and orc and children who were both, a visible representation of how much had changed in 3 decades. "I would do it all again," Ethan said, holding Dara's hand and looking into the face he had loved for so long. Every difficult moment, every conflict, every challenge, all of it was worth it to have this life with you. "As would I," Dara said, touching the silver lockets that still hung around her neck, their patterns worn smooth by time but still beautiful. "You asked me to wear both of these openly, to be brave enough to show the world what we meant to each other. That bravery changed everything, Ethan. Not just for us, but for everyone who came after." "We changed things together," Ethan corrected gently. "You were the one who kept your locket in secret, who loved me when it would have been safer not to. I just asked you to stop hiding." "And I am grateful you did," Dara said, smiling at him with all the warmth of 3 decades together. "Every single day I am grateful." They kissed, to the cheers of their assembled family, and Ethan thought about how strange and wonderful life was, how a broken bridge could become a blessing, how a returned gift could lead to a hidden love, how asking someone to wear 2 silver lockets openly could start a revolution, however small, however local. He had been a lonely blacksmith once, skilled at his craft but isolated from real connection, surviving rather than truly living. And then an orc woman had walked into his forge bringing firewood and vegetables, and everything had changed. She had challenged him, inspired him, loved him, and given him a life richer than anything he could have built alone. The sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose, and Ethan and Dara stood together, surrounded by the family and community they had built through courage and love and stubborn determination. The silver lockets glinted in the dying light, paired as they were always meant to be, worn openly as they should always have been. And in that moment, standing in the warm glow of 3 decades of love, Ethan Norwood knew with absolute certainty that every difficult choice, every act of courage, every moment of defiance against prejudice had been worth it. He had found his partner, his equal, his love, and he had been brave enough to claim her publicly despite the cost. That bravery had given him everything, and he would not trade a single moment of it for an easier path, because easier would have meant living without Dara, and that was no life at all. They stayed in the clearing as the stars emerged, holding hands and watching their grandchildren play, their children laugh, their friends celebrate. This was their legacy, this blended community, this proof that love could bridge any divide if people were brave enough to try. And it had all started with 2 silver lockets, a woman brave enough to keep one in secret, and a man brave enough to ask her to wear both openly. That was the beginning of everything good in Ethan's life. That was the moment that changed his world. And standing here 3 decades later, surrounded by proof that their love had rippled outward to touch countless others, he knew that asking Dara to wear both lockets was the best thing he had ever done. She had said yes. She had been brave with him, And together, they had built something beautiful that would outlast them both, a testament to the power of choosing love over fear, courage over comfort, and each other over the opinions of those who could not understand. The night deepened and the celebration continued, and Ethan and Dara remained at the heart of it, the couple who had started it all, the pair whose love had proven that different peoples could not only coexist but thrive together. The silver lockets gleamed against Dara's collarbone, catching the light of the festival lanterns, a constant reminder of where they had started and how far they had come. And as they walked back to their home that night, surrounded by family, their hands intertwined as they had been for 30 years, Ethan sent a silent thanks to his younger self for having the courage to make those lockets, and to Dara for being brave enough to keep one when she thought keeping both would hurt him. That secret love, that hidden choice, had led to this life. And this life was everything he had ever wanted, everything he had ever dreamed of, and more than he had ever believed possible. He squeezed Dara's hand and she squeezed back, and they smiled at each other in the darkness. Two people who had chosen each other against the world's wishes and found happiness anyway. The silver lockets, both of them, worn openly and proudly, had become a symbol not just of their love but of the possibility that existed when people were brave enough to reach across divides and see the person on the other side. That was their legacy. That was their gift to the world. And as they reached their home and stepped inside to warmth and light and the laughter of family, Ethan knew that he would not change a single thing about the journey that had brought them here. It had been hard. It had been worth it. And he would do it all again in a heartbeat, because loving Dara Coldbrook was the easiest, truest, best thing he had ever done. The lockets glinted one last time in the lamplight as they closed the door on another perfect day, and Ethan and Dara moved into the rest of their lives together, partners and lovers and friends, bound by silver and choice, and a love that had defied expectations to become something extraordinary.